morning, everybody. Oh, are you on mute, Keith? I can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry.
We've
I'm not
we've
now.
only been doing it for a couple of years now. You'd think we would know.
Yeah, I was just going to say the familiar introduction of those counting down from the counting down tune for Webinar Wednesday.
Yeah. It's like when you get really good on hold music and you're sitting having a wee bop while you're waiting for somebody to answer the phone.
Yeah.
But no, welcome along everybody for In Control Scotland's monthly webinar Wednesday for November. Today we're going to have a good old chat about person-centred planning and how you can get one, and whether that's online or in person, and some of the changes and exciting things that are happening around person-centred planning. But yeah.
And we've got three guests today, haven't we, Pauline? So we've got three guests. We've got Iain Wilson from the Independent Living Fund in Scotland, and then we have our own colleagues, Dr. Daniel Farrell and Alistair Minty, who are going to come on and talk about their experiences and of planning both in person and online, as you say, yeah.
Yeah, we have a multi-skilled bunch of folk around about us, not just presenters, but also guests too. So we're on Facebook and YouTube. If you've got any comments or questions, please do pop them in the chat. I've seen a couple of people saying good morning already. But as always, we'll have to hear from you. So let us know if you've got anything to say and we'll bring you up. So good morning, Liam. Good morning, Jacqueline. But before we bring on our guests, we'll do our usual catchy uppy and talk about what we've been up to. We've just published a new paper, haven't we, Keith? Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, we have. Yeah. New paper, which is called Self-Directed Support as the Foundation of a New Relationship in the National Care Service in Scotland. So quite a long title, but a paper which really talks about the essence of self-directed support and describes and renews this 7-step process to people being in control and directing their own support, with some new graphics and updated content from a similar paper that was written quite a while ago, but really reflecting now on our current situation and the current context of implementation. 8 years on from the legal implementation and longer on from the previous strategy and so on. So it's interesting, isn't it? It's an interesting paper written and updated by our associate Nick Crosby.
Yeah, it's a good resource because it's not only kind of to get people thinking, but there's some work. It's got some kind of workbook elements to it as well, where there's some questions for you to ask yourself if you're a practitioner or working in a team or whatever your role is in helping people access self-directed support. And it's got that, like Keith said, good graphics that you can use when you're doing planning with people as well. So hopefully not just help people think about SDS in the context of the National Care Service, but maybe help you do some of the planning with families.
Yeah, it's got some nice little light bulbs in there, hasn't it? Which is where you're asking the questions around it. I really like the little light bulbs because it does break it up and allows you to think a little bit about each of the sections of the report. I think that enhances it quite a lot, makes it more usable, like you say, and almost like a workbook.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the point, isn't it? Really, just it's something that people might be able to use, might be able to help them in thinking about various aspects of self-directed support.
Yep, absolutely. And some other wee comments coming in. Good morning, Michael. Good to see you. Calling us the A-team. I don't have my jewellery on today, so I can't be Mr. T. Don't know what one I am then.
Okay, well, it's only relevant if you're above a certain age, I think, as well. And I mean, Michael is almost above a certain age these days.
almost. And June shared the link as well to the new relationship paper for folk to go on and download and have a wee look. That's up there. Thanks, June. What else have we got going on? There's some big interesting stuff happening out there in social care world, social work world as well, isn't there? There's lots of you will have heard of the Independent Review of Adult Social Care, which is sometimes called the Feely Review, which led to the creation of the National Care Service. But there's There's another independent review just literally just started in the last few days, running on till June next year, called, get my words in the right order, the Independent Review of Inspection, Scrutiny and Regulation, which is looking at and is really keen to hear people's views on how you think support and social services should be overseen and reviewed and make sure they're working really well. So there's a call for evidence from the Scottish Government just now, and lots of online sessions happening for people to come along and find out more. So if you're involved in using or delivering any kind of social services, it's worth having a wee look and seeing if it's something you want to take part in. I'm going to launch an event next week on Monday, so I'll be able to speak a lot more about it after that. But for the moment, I'm just looking forward to finding out what that's going to look like and what the outcome will be.
That's good. That sounds interesting, despite its very long title, and hopefully,
Yeah, we're not known for our brevity, and I mean, we're bad at that as well. We like a long title. Need to get snappier.
Yeah, maybe we should just say about the other two lunchtime sessions that are coming up this month as well. Then before we invite our guests on, next Tuesday we've got our which is the second Tuesday of every month, the shorter. What's always the shorter lunchtime session, isn't it? It's an hour from 12 to 1. And this month we are talking about the new dementia strategy.
Yeah, so another bit of interest in national work where the Scottish Government are looking to speak to anybody and everybody about how they think dementia services should look and feel in the future and what the strategy should be like for that. So we're really keen that self-directed support is for everybody. So we are welcoming along somebody from the Scottish Government dementia team, and it'll be co-facilitated by dementia advocate and researcher Martin, who will also we'll be trying to think about what self-directed support looks like for people with dementia and make sure that those kind of principles of choice, freedom, control, flexibility, dignity are upheld in the new strategy as well. So looking forward to that chat. If you want to get involved, email June.
And that's next Tuesday from 12 to 1. Dementia researcher and advocate and participant on the Working Together for Change programme, isn't he, Martin? So, So links everywhere. And here's June just posting the link for that for anyone. And then the next lunchtime session is feels like quite long in the future, but it won't be long before it comes around. Is Thursday the 24th of November. So it's our regular lunchtime session for anyone interested in self-directed support for children, young people, and families. Thursday the 24th of November. So it feels like it's slightly earlier this month, because the last Thursday is the 24th, between 12 and 1:30. And this month we have colleagues from Shetland, and we're going to be thinking about what are described as steps 2 and steps 3 in the paper about a new relationship. Really just thinking about how an assessment's made about people getting the right resource to help them plan, and then thinking a bit more about planning. So it follows on quite well from our discussion today, which probably leads in maybe to inviting our guests onto
I've got one more thing to say before we forget, because I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget, is that we're actually holding mental health first aid training in Aberdeen later in the month, and we have a couple of spaces available for it. So if anybody is, and we'd like it to be for people who are local to that kind of area, because we know that training sometimes is quite central belt focused. If you are interested in taking part in mental health first aid training in later in the month, I've forgotten the dates, but we'll stick them in the chat. Please do get in touch, because we'd like to fill the spaces with people who are dead keen to do it. So please get in touch.
I think it's the 29th and 30th of November.
Thank you.
It's like the last 2 days of November.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. We also had earlier on, we had Jacqueline, who was just saying she'd be looking into ILF when she's 16, about her son, and obviously all the links that June's been sharing with us. So shall we invite our guests on now?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
As if by magic they'll all appear. Oh, there we all are. Hi everyone.
Hello.
Greetings.
Thanks very much for joining us today. Will we do a wee quick round of introductions? Because I think because there's so many folk on the screen, I'm not sure people's names appear. So we'll definitely do a wee round of intros. But thanks so much for joining us. Alistair, do you want to start? People know who you are, but we might as well.
They do know who I am. It's just I'm on the different side of the fence today. So I'm Alistair Minty from ILF Scotland, but I'm coming on with another hat today to talk about the connections with the ILF Transitions Fund and the person-centred planning.
Excellent.
Yeah. No hat, same shed is what I would say, Alistair.
No hat, I know.
Probably inappropriately say that, but there we are. Let's move on to Danielle. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Dr. Danielle Farrell. I'm the Managing Director of Your Options Understood, and I'm here today to speak about the planning work I do to support ILF and people applying, alongside some of the other planning work I do as part of Your Options Understood.
Thank you very much,
You're not wearing a hat and your hair's the same as it was last week, Danielle?
Yeah, but I haven't been on webinar Wednesday for a while, so it'll be different from the last time.
Ah, right. Okay, fine. And what about Iain? Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us about your hair or your hat?
Well, there's not much to say about my hair, if I'm absolutely honest, Keith. It is receding speedily to the point where it's about to meet my neck at the back. But yeah, I'm Iain Wilson. To give myself my big title, I'm the Self-Directed Support Manager for the ILF Transition Fund, or the Transition Fund Manager, which is much easier to say and much more understandable. And I'm here today really to talk about how the Transition Fund can help young people to get a proper, fully formed, person-centred plan, and just say a wee bit about what's happened with the fund since COVID and how things have changed for us.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, let's just start from the absolute basics and say, like, people use the words person-centred all the time, but what does it really mean? So, Danielle, can I ask, I'm going to put you on the spot in the first instance because I know you'll be fit for it. Tell us, what does person-centred planning mean for you and Your Options Understood? Explain it to us.
Person-centred planning, for me and Your Options Understood, means dreaming big, removing the barriers that disability often brings and allowing people to just think outside the box, I guess, because sometimes just with the challenges of disability, that doesn't always happen as often as it should. So it's allowing people to think how they want their life to be, look to the future, and break it down into how do we get there? How do we get to the dream? Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. And that's a really perfect summary for me. And I like the idea of thinking outside the box. There is no box. Chuck the box out the window. There are no boxes in person-centred planning at all, which is great. And I know that's your approach as well. Alistair, have you got anything you want to add to that at all from you? Because you've been doing this a while.
Yeah, I mean, I first started doing person-centred planning in sort of mid 90s. Back in the days of Scottish Human Services and stuff, and I would encourage folk to download. There's a book called People, Plans and Possibilities, which you can download from the internet. I'm not sure if it's on Diversity Press or somewhere else. I'll look at the link, but anyway, you can get the electronic version. It's still a brilliant book, and it goes into lots of details about paths, ELPs, maps, all lots of different types of planning. And I guess one of the things I would say is just that the key features are that it focuses on, rather than starting from now in small incremental changes, it looks at who the whole person is. It takes the asset-based approach about who you are, what makes you tick, rather than just looking at what stuff do you find hard and how do we work with that. So that's the stuff that makes the difference, that makes us reach different conclusions than we would if we would have ordinary sort of medical-based or support-based conversations. We miss who the real person is, and so quite often we need to dream bigger, a bit like Danielle's saying. So person-centered planning helps us to do that, helps us to think widely, but it's a challenge for us sometimes, because sometimes we don't like to raise people's expectations. But the actual fact is that we need to raise expectations. We need to have plans and exciting dreams for our lives, whether we've got a disability or not. Otherwise, we're never going to get there. So it's a really important tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really like that. Yeah, it's so important that all of us, and like person-centered planning can benefit absolutely everybody. It's not even just people with disabilities. We're talking specifically about how you can access resources to be able to help people with disabilities have person-centered plans. But I did one a way back when I started doing my person-centered planning training, and it was brilliant for me just to think about what the big things are that are important to me, and what I can do to add any inch incremental distance to be able to get in there, do you know?
100%.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Because it is about that idea of dreaming big but taking small steps to get there. For some reason, what I started thinking when you were both talking there was that idea about what's important to you when you're planning and what's important for you when you're planning. Maybe we can come back to that particular question in a minute, but so you and Danielle and Alistair, you've been setting that broader context, but maybe, Iain, do you want to just tell us something about how that fits with the Independent Living Fund and the Transitions Fund in particular that you're manager of, that you mentioned?
Yeah. So in terms of the Transition Fund, we deal with around 2,000 to 2,500 applications a year for funding. But in amongst that, there are a number of young people who, while they want to access the funding, don't really have an idea about what they want to do with it. And I think, unfortunately, there's quite a small proportion of young people who apply to the fund who consider person-centered planning to be part of that process. We very early on in the history of the Transition Fund put in the person-centered planning, or the Young Person's Planning Grant, as we call it, on our website. We put that in really because we were getting a lot of kind of unformed, unfocused applications from young people that you couldn't really see what the outcome was. You couldn't really see where the young person was headed. And it looked just like a list of things, which, to be fair, some people are quite happy with a list of things, but you can see there's so much more potential when you use the money in a focused way. So we introduced the Young Person's Planning Grant. It's a smaller amount of money and a simplified application. So we don't go into the bit about what's your outcome and what's your goal, because you're going to set that when you're doing the person-centered plan. So it's really about, why do you want a person-centered plan? Who's going to do it? Who's going to help you form this person-centered plan? So we work with the Person-Centered Planning Network Scotland, of which both Alistair and Danielle are members, and there's a number of other colleagues as well. And we fund these professional planners to do plans with the young people who come to the fund. And it's also, I suppose I should say as well, it's not a one-off deal. Young people can have as many person-centered plans as they wish going through their because you can reapply to the Transition Fund a number of times between the ages when you're eligible, which is 16 to 25. You can actually have, every time you make an application, you could have a person-centered plan. Most people don't, but you can have. And also, if you have an award early on in that kind of time period where you're eligible, and you've decided that you want X, Y, and Z for that, that's fine. You can just have a director award. But later on in that process, you might actually think, actually I need to get a bit of focus on this, and you want to have a plan subsequently. So if you've already had a grant, you can still have a person-centered plan that would then move on into another grant to fund that. And we, excuse me, we like to have a kind of flow where the young person goes through the person-centered planning process, and then hopefully the planner assists them to fill in their full application so that they can then put their plan into place. So that's how it should flow. And for those young people who go through that process, it works really well. And we come out with some really surprising results. We've got a number of young people who came in thinking they were going to ask for X, Y, and Z, and what they got was A, B, C. But the ABC worked so much better for them because it was personalised and it actually fitted with, like what Alistair was saying there, going back to first principles and actually working out what works for this young person.
That's brilliant, thanks, Iain. Can I just, in case anybody's watching who doesn't even have a Scooby what the transition fund is, would you just say a wee sentence or two about what that fund, the actual the funding is available to young people as well?
Of course. So the transition fund came in really with the start of ILF Scotland. Obviously, for those of you who don't know, ILF used to be a UK-wide organisation who gave people with quite high levels of disability additional funding so they could remain in the community and not have to go into residential care. That was the initial start of it. It developed from there, but in 2010 the UK government decided to close ILF down to new applications because essentially it had become a bit of a victim of its own success. It was too successful, and the powers that be thought it was costing too much money. So out of the ashes of ILF UK came ILF Scotland. Now ILF Scotland also covers Northern Ireland. In the rest of the UK, the money was given to the local authorities to manage. And what's happened with that is ILF Scotland's funding is ring-fenced for ILF Scotland, so it only goes to the recipients of ILF. In the local authorities where the funding was given to the local authorities, it was still ring-fenced for those people. But as those people have dropped off, so some of them have gone into residential care, some have maybe gone into long-term hospital stays, and some unfortunately will have passed away over the piece. So when that money was released from being used by those people for their ILF funding, it was subsumed into the local authority budget. So it was no longer ring fenced for disabled people. That hasn't happened in Scotland. But when ILF Scotland was created on the 1st of July 2015, Nicola Sturgeon, who was then the Deputy First Minister, announced that there would be an additional £5 million to reopen ILF Scotland. Unfortunately, £5 million when you're dealing with people with very high care needs doesn't really go very far. And we looked at the figures, and it was probably going to help about another 300 or 400 people maximum. And we knew the demand was much, much higher than that out there. So we got permission to do something different with that funding. So rather than have a deluge of 40,000 applications where we had to choose 400 people, we created the transition fund. And that was really about where the world was at that point in time, with young people who had very high support needs being pretty well catered for by local authority services, and another group at the other end who didn't really need that much support, if any, maybe just a bit of signposting. And this group in the middle, where the young people, if they didn't get a bit of support, would basically isolate themselves in their homes and do very little. They wouldn't create the networks because they didn't have the wherewithal to do that. So that's what the Transition Fund was created to do. It supports young people aged 15 to 25, although you're 25 to your 26. So I'm just saying you can apply right up to the day before your 26th birthday. And you can have up to £4,000 in any one 12-month period to help you achieve your independent living outcomes and to become more engaged and active in the community. So we fund all sorts of different things that help young people be out there and communicate with people and be part of their community. We fund all sorts of different things. There's also a list of things we don't fund, which are generally the statutory duties of other bodies, and a few add-ons to that where we can't either justify the costs or it's not sustainable for the young person if we only fund it for a year. So, but basically we fund a whole load of things, like we can fund courses. Our number one request is driving lessons. We've funded loads and loads of driving lessons. We've probably funded 3/4 of the beauty therapists who are currently working in Scotland. So we fund all sorts of different courses, depending on what the young person's interested in. We can fund IT equipment. We can fund other types of equipment, depending on what young people like. Sewing machines, for instance. We've had a bit of a run on sewing machines recently. We can also fund sports equipment, things like kayaks and paddle boards and you name it. Gym memberships, memberships of clubs, you name it. It's all on the website, ILF, www.ilf.scot. And if you go to the Transition Fund pages, there's all sorts of information there. And there's also what we've just recently introduced is a price guide. So previously we needed a quote for everything that you asked for. We've now produced a price guide which has the most commonly requested items and a price range. So if your item falls within that price range, so if you want a computer that's £700 and that falls within the price range, you don't have to give us a quote, you just need to tell us how much money you need, and we'll manage it at the back end when you send us in your receipts for what you've spent. We've been trying to slim down our processing. We've been inundated since COVID, absolutely inundated. Last year, our increase was roughly 25% on the previous year. This year, we're doing exactly the same. We're nearly at 25% again this year. It looks as if we might breach the 3,000 applications in a year mark this year for the first time. We've had just over 8,000 applications in the whole life of the fund, and we're just about, probably next week, to celebrate £10 million out the door. So it's a substantial amount of money to support young people in transition, and it's going from strength to strength. But because we're dealing with so many more applications, we're having to try and slim down the processing as much as we possibly can, because people are having to wait about 10, 11 weeks just now for an answer. And we would like to get that back down. Previously, it was about 3 or 4 weeks. So we're trying to work towards getting that back to be a more responsive thing, because as we all know, young people are not good at waiting for things. I've got a couple of teenagers who live in this house, and quite frankly, if they've got to wait 5 minutes for their tea, it's a bad day. So people having to wait 12 weeks for an answer about a grant funding that they're waiting to hear about, and they're eager to get on. It's quite a difficult ask. So we're working towards trying to make that as streamlined as possible.
That's a really interesting thing, isn't it? The whole idea of simplifying the process and trying to reduce the barriers to people accessing the fund. That feels like it's been a principle of the fund since it started, really. That's something that you've worked on, and there's always.
I mean, it certainly has been, Keith. I think the difficulty is because we are the type of body that we are. I mean, we're a non-departmental public body. We've got to account for all that we spend. We're audited annually, so there have to be checks and balances. It's about putting in the right checks and balances, and sometimes what the returns that we make and the questions that we ask of ourselves are what cause the issues within that. The biggest issue that we have really is getting the right proof that a young person has a disability, because we use the Equalities Act 2010. It's a very broad definition, and sometimes young people have a diagnosis of a condition, but the diagnosis itself doesn't tell us how that affects them, and that's how a disability is defined under the Equalities Act. So we sometimes have to go back to them, and we're doing that much earlier in the process now, so that by the time we actually get to processing the application, we've done all that work, and it's just a case of actually focusing on the application itself. And the price guide was another move towards that, because again, going back and forward, trying to get quotes, and not everybody understands what a quote is. We've discovered this quite frequently as we go through, that asking people for a quote, they'll send us a picture of the thing without the cost and stuff like that. So it's just about trying to take all of that kind of to and fro and out of the process. So it's a much simplified thing, and the contacts that we have for the young people are when they send in the application and when we tell them that they've been successful and how would they like the money.
And Danielle and Alistair, you've both supported people using one of the grants using one of the person-centered planning grants. So just share a little bit about. I'll share a couple of comments, but if you can share a little bit about what's that felt like from your perspective, helping people through that. Danielle, do you want to start with that? And then I'll also just put up from Karen, who's just talking about how that's happened with her son, and just saying, well, yeah, that's a great opportunity to get that support to be able to think and plan together. Yep.
So I have done a few plans for young people who are applying to the ILF, and it's just amazing to see the difference it can make for people. One young person was quite, he sort of lost his way a bit and was a bit he'd lost his zest for life, if that's what you want to call it, when his mum contacted me. But through the the process of doing his plan. He's very focused, and I'm glad to say that with the help of his ILF fund, he's now at the Glasgow School of Music doing a course in composition classes, and he will be taking part in a barista course because that is his chosen employment if he is successful in getting employment in that area. But also, I've up until recently, any plans that I've been doing for the ILF have been online, but only in the last couple of weeks I did my first one in person for a family, and that was as much a learning experience for me as it was for them, and it was just different to be able to take them through that experience in person.
I think that's a really interesting thing to take a wee step and take a wee moment to think about, because when person-centred plans have been about for donkey's years, right, and they were always a big giant bit of paper on the wall, usually somebody who was really good at colouring in and doing all the graphics and somebody asking all the questions, and it was taking place physically in person with the people that were important to the person having the plan done. And there would be usually some nice cakes and tea and coffee and all the rest of it. But COVID changed that, so and made it not possible. So Danielle, you've been doing plans in a really creative and interesting way online, haven't you? Which I think it's really cool for people to talk about, to hear about, because I think I have a picture in my head of what person-centred planning is, and I think you've changed that for a lot of folk.
Yeah, I've been doing it online since probably we were involved in establishing the Planning Network Scotland that Iain mentioned. So, as you say, Pauline, traditionally planning is done on a piece of paper with really bright colours and somebody drawing and somebody or graphicing rather, and another facilitator leading someone through the sort of process. But due to my cerebral palsy and the fact that I couldn't do that, I draw it on a piece of paper. As well as that, I can't draw to save a life, so people probably wouldn't want me to draw on paper. So I use set of electronic graphics, which takes people through the same process. So we start with the dream and work our way backwards to where we are now and how we get to that dream. But what the graphics do is allow for a different level of personalisation, because anybody that I'm planning for can also add things like photos, their favourite song, if they wanted to include voiceover as part of the plan, or any other audio that could also work. But what the online sessions also allow for is, when you spoke about previously having to be in a room with the person, sometimes this could be all day, and although there's tea and coffee and nice cakes and things, sometimes young people think about the idea of having to be in a room all day talking about themselves, and it's something they dread. Whereas with online sessions, they can talk to me for as long or as little time as they want, and if they want to talk to me while they're in their pyjamas eating a piece of toast, that's fine too. So it can be done in bite-sized sessions in a way that works for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And that sounds really interesting, doesn't it? And it's like, it was a pandemic that forced that, really, didn't it? It was a pandemic that enabled that to happen. So I suppose we can't think of many positive things, but we can think of that greater flexibility around planning maybe is one of the things that we can think of. Alistair, just tell us a bit about the sorts of things that you've done as well, then, in terms of having to readapt and do things differently, really. And
well, that was when the pandemic started. I guess that was my first thing was how am I going to do planning with people, whether it's the ILF or just generally, and that's why I bought the software that Danielle's talking about, because we did a bit of work with Danielle with my other hat and my Positively Minty hat on, and helped her to develop some of the options she had for moving online. So I shared the format that I developed in terms of using this computer software and then adapting a format to use it online. And I'd said, look, I think this would be perfect because it allows people. I mean, I'm not a skilled drawer as well. I've done graphicing in person, but it's a bit like, is that a horse or a dog? But the in-person stuff still has its benefits. But one of the benefits as well is, even if you're doing it in person, like I've done one in person which I co-facilitated with Liz, who's one of the other members of the PCP network. That we're doing a video as well. We're not doing that's what people are actually, choosing, rather than, even if you've got the option now, because a bit of paper is nice and it's exciting on the day, but it's not very accessible later. It tends to, it goes on a wall or it can go in a cupboard. And the issue for some of the young people particularly is, especially if you're not maybe that great at communicating your dreams and your thoughts, how do you share that later? Whereas if you've got that on a little video file and it's maybe 2 or 3 minutes long, so it's not too much for, you can just open up your phone or your tablet and hand it to somebody and hit play, and somebody can start a conversation with you about what's important to you, and it's just a really, really much more interactive, much more portable version, and you can go back and add to it later, I guess, as well, is the other part of it. So that's really good. I've really liked the fact that you can dip in and out with people, because for some people, their levels of anxiety, I've worked with some folk with, significant mental health issues and stuff like that, who've taken a while to get comfortable with people. And I might have like a couple of conversations with mum or dad with them off camera to start with until they're comfortable to come on and speak. And that level of flexibility was never there in person, because you were quite often traveling a fair distance to make this happen. So you kind of made the best of it, whatever, even if somebody wasn't having a good day. So that's been really important. I guess following on, from Iain's earlier comment as well about not prejudging, I think that's one of the things I still would encourage anybody who's getting involved. Don't think that you need to come into the planning meeting with a list of stuff to buy or a list of outcomes, because the whole idea is to just empty your head of all of that stuff, immersing yourself in the process of exploring and going on that journey, and then think about what you might use the money for, because otherwise it just becomes like, we'll put the cart before the horse, we say, well, this is what we're going to try and do, and this is what we need to talk about. And very often it's not, as the more we explore what's important to the young person, it sometimes can move away from what the parent identified might be an outcome from the fund. You know what I mean? So that's one of the things I really think that we need to keep a focus on, is that open-minded. You don't have to go in with all the answers.
Yeah, I think that's really important as well, Alistair. It is just about what I also reflects what Iain said about some people start with X, Y, Z and end up with A, B, C. And for me, I think it's something like, you don't need to go in with that idea of a shopping list, because what you're trying to do is develop what you described, Danielle, is the dream that you want to achieve, and then work out how you're going to achieve that by thinking about all the resources that are to hand, including the small grant that you may be going to access from the ILF.
It's also,
Iain,
sorry, I was just going to add into that and say it's also about like not just so an example that immediately springs to mind when we think of it, when I was thinking about what you were saying there, Alistair, is I did a person-centred plan for somebody, and their big dream was to be a pop star. And we were like, so tell me more about that. And it was only through asking lots and lots of questions and figuring out that it was about, actually, I want people to see me for who I am. I want to have a voice. I want to be respected. I want people to look up to me. And you're like, oh, that's different. So it's about taking, but it's so clearly linked. And so it's about taking what the big picture dream is and understanding what that actually means to the person, because it's dead easy to say, actually, do you know what, it's really unlikely you're going to be a pop star. But do you know what? Once you start drilling underneath it, it's not impossible at all. But once you start drilling underneath and understand why is that important to you, then that's where some of the magic of person-centred planning comes, isn't it? And that's when you can start saying, oh yeah, we can do this, let's think about this, and get all excited.
And the fact that the transition fund is there when so much other support around about disability, is not focused on, such wide-ranging, self-development. It really stands out as such a valuable opportunity for people to dream big and to get involved in things that they wouldn't necessarily otherwise be able to do. I think it's genuinely life-changing stuff, and I really think that the Scottish Government has to be applauded for keeping supporting it, because I know that money is tough and things like, times are tough, but it's genuinely, been a way to engage with some people and transform their sense of what's out there and what they can do next. So
can I ask Iain, can I just ask you, you said when it started in 2015 it was a £5 million fund, and you will be approaching having made 10 million whatever grants by the end of this year. Just thinking, I'm just really trying to think into the future. Is that 5 million recurring every year, or is it something that's been invested that means that you can still make grants? Or just think of, I'm just really asking a question about the future, actually, specifically. But just
anybody who's ever worked with government funding will know there's a kind of edict that if you don't spend it, they'll take it back. So we got £5 million in our first year. We operated for 3 months and spent very little. So we've been kind of clawing back that £5 million over the past few years from the very low starting point that we had in 2018. And that was, so we have a kind of recurring budget at the moment of 3.6 million a year. That's for two reasons. One, we've never spent any more than that. And B, we can't actually physically process any more than that at the moment. There's a ceiling that we hit with the number of staff that we have, where unless we make these streamlining changes, and that's partially why we've done that, we really just can't process anymore. I mean, we've gone from our ceiling last year was £2.8 million, and that was about how much we could process. We think we're probably going to spend very nearly the whole 3.6 this year. So the efficiencies within the team and with how we process things have made that difference. But there's no point in giving us more money until we can process it. And then you're dealing with the chicken and the egg of, do you staff it up in the belief that you're going to get more applications? I think the transition fund, to be fair, is only going to grow, particularly as we're looking down the barrel of a fresh austerity movement, by the looks of things, coming up from the UK government. It does look as if increasingly the transition fund will be a bit of a lifeline. It already is. For young people who have been leaving school in the past 2 or 3 years with little or no transition planning, for some very reasonable reasons, because schools were closed and whatever, but those services really haven't restarted in any significant way. So we are picking up the slack in terms of the statutory agencies who aren't meeting that particular criteria for a whole range of reasons, not least the staffing crisis within social work and social care. So it's not there's not the willingness to do that, but it's not happening on the ground. And regardless of the reason for that, these young people need the kind of support that we're able to supply. So I think that's a good part of where we've seen the increase and the increased demand. We see a lot more, frankly, desperate families coming to us who have absolutely no other options for their young people. And we've started to extend the eligibility. So as I said right at the very beginning, it was about engagement in the community and activity. And we had kind of deliberately but we deliberately not focused on the young people with the highest level of needs, because they were quite well catered for through statutory means. That's no longer the case, I would have to say. So we will now consider applications from much more significantly disabled young people who previously would have been well served by the statutory services and would have had places to go and things to do, but for whom the community doesn't really hold an awful lot at times. It doesn't have much meaning for them. So instead of them going into the community, we can sometimes now send the community to them. So again, it depends on the circumstances and it depends on the application, but because we use the Equalities Act, we can make it as broad as we want. We are a discretionary fund, so we do have some discretion. So provided we're not totally flaunting the policy position that we've been given by Scottish ministers, we do have that flexibility where we can make decisions around, this is a particular set of circumstances, and in this situation we can award some funding for whatever the young person is looking to do at that point. So the whole ethos of the fund is still about that community engagement, but we do recognise that for some young people that's a particular challenge that might be a couple of stages down the road.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that, thanks, Iain. I think it's probably a good time, Danielle, to ask you about, because Iain talked there about some of the criteria or the limits of the fund that were there originally and how they've addressed that. But I mean, I know Danielle and Alistair as well have obviously done planning in other places and out with the transition fund. I just maybe wanted to give you the opportunity, Danielle, to say something about your Dream Plan Live programme and whether, because that's a different part of funding that you've got to do a similar sort of thing, but with people who are without the age limits on it, isn't it?
Yeah. So thanks, Keith. So the Dream Plan Live programme that Your Options Understood has, and thanks Jude for sharing the link. That was funding that Your Options Understood was awarded quite recently from the National Lottery Community Fund. And what I have proposed to do with that is open it up a bit wider. So people, for example, I know from my own personal experience that older people, if we can use that term, need a plan as much as younger people. So for example, I was 30 when I had my first person's income plan done. I do a second one a bit more recently than that, but what it did for me was open up the fact that I realised, had this plan been done a lot sooner, and somebody had actually sat down and said, okay, who's Danielle? What's important to Danielle? Not just what keeps Danielle functioning and alive. How much easier certain processes would have been with the Dream Plan Live programme. I've hopefully opened that up to other people in similar circumstances. So I've been working with some people who are participating, for example, in the Working Together for Change programme, who have come to me since then, who need a plan and who need to have that conversation and to quote somebody the other day, for social work to see them as a person and not just the support needs. So that's what I hope to achieve with the Dream Plan Live programme.
And it's really for, sorry. I was just going to say, actually, for anybody who's just feeling a bit stuck as well, isn't it? It's like people who they know they want a change in their lives, but they're not quite sure what they want to do or how to go about it.
Yeah, and because person-centred planning isn't as yet a statutory service, I would hope that the Dream Plan Live programme would be a small part, however small, in changing the conversations between those that need the support and the local authority.
And I was just going to say, there is still an opportunity for people to get involved. You've still got space to do that with other people if they want to get in touch with you, Danielle.
Yeah, there's still a few places left. So I hope, if you're watching and know of anybody who would benefit from the programme, please feel free to get in touch.
Okay. I mean, Pauline, we're already at 11:50 because we could have we've barely touched the surface, it feels like, but we're already at 11:50. Alistair, I'm just gonna share the information that you've got about the mental health first aid.
Yes, yeah.
So that people can see that as well.
So it's a 2-day course, and it's from 11 till 5:30 on a Tuesday, Wednesday, the 29th and 30th. Now, usually, most of the time, it's 150 to 250 pounds for a 2-day course, and we're just saying if somebody's external to In Control, that it would be £50, and that's basically to cover our just the venue costs, and that does get you lunch as well, and attendance at both days. And it's the recognised Public Health Scotland mental health first aid training. So get in touch as soon as you can if you're interested, because there's a maximum of 12 spaces, and at the moment we have, I think, maybe 4 spare. So get in touch if you are interested.
But we should add external, meaning if you're a graduate of one of In Control Scotland's programmes, then you're not paying. We'd love to have you come along. So if you can
that's what I meant. Yes.
No, just to clarify that in case anybody's watching thinking, I'd love to do this, but we don't want money to be a barrier. So if you've been part of Working Together for Change, Partners for Policy Making, any of the leadership stuff that we've done at any point in time, drop us a wee line. Love to have you. Shameless plugs. No, thank you so much to our amazing panel. That was a great chat, but again, we have run out of time. Do we want to have any final thoughts on person-centred planning? Just a wee quick, if you could say a sentence about why it's great or what you think about it, and then we'll close from there. I think that would bring us back onto a nice topic of ending. Alistair, do you want to say do you have any final reflections?
So final reflections is just that, I was down in Angus yesterday doing equal conversation session with children and families teams, and also care management. And one of the things that was really clear is when we're talking about that value-led approach to assessment, to planning, to having conversations about where we move forward, that person-centred planning is at the heart of that, the value of not jumping in with services solutions and exploring who the person is, that person centre is just at the heart of that. And so I just think that a lot of the things that we try and do are intrinsically linked, and this is as good a place to start as ever.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Alistair. Iain, anything final you want to say?
All I would say is that if you think that you can get a lot out of a transition fund grant, by simply applying for a grant and asking for things, you'll get so much more out of it if you use the opportunity for the person-centred planning process. It'll change your mind about what you think you need, I would imagine, and you get so much more value out of the money that you can have from the fund than you will if you just ask for things.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Iain. And final word from you, Danielle.
I think for me, I would say to anybody who's watched today and thought, I don't know if that process is right for me, or what would I get out of the planning process, I would just say do it, because yes, it can be emotional, and yes, it can change your mindset on things, and what you want out of life and what you, or in the case of the ILF, what you're applying for, but it's in a positive way. And I think that for me is the impact planning can have on somebody's life potentially is a whole lot more than just a process.
Yeah, perfect. And brilliant way to close. Thank you so much to our panel today, and we'll hopefully see lots of you same time next month, first Wednesday of the month for next webinar Wednesday, if not before. So thanks so much, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.